Whitfield is a business speaker, journalist, author, and moderator who interprets the noise at the intersection of business, politics, and society while bringing clarity, humour, and insight to complex issues. According to Bruce's research, we make 35,000 decisions every day, from what we wear to who we marry to when to change jobs. These decisions shape our lives, but how much do we know about the process of making them? And how do we make the right choices? In a new podcast, The Art of Deciding, award-winning journalist Bruce Whitfield meets a wide range of decision makers, from a criminal investigator to successful entrepreneurs, from one of the most commercially successful authors of all time and a champion poker player. Bruce joins me today to discuss the intricacies of the decisions we make, to introduce his new podcast and share his knowledge on the business of decision making. Welcome to Connections Radio, Bruce, and thank you for joining me today. Can you please start by taking us through some of your career highlights?
Career highlights. I don't know. I've just been very fortunate, I think, from the age of 5, knowing precisely what I want to do with my life. And one of my earliest decisions I recall making at the age of 5 was watching my dad on a farm in Africa doing artificial insemination on a cow. Now, I'm not going to take you through the gory details of artificial insemination on bovines. Suffice to say, it's neither good for the cow nor for the person doing the inseminating. And it was a very, very hot day. It was buzzing with flies. I had hay fever. And on the radio was a lovely man. His name was Jeremy Dawes. And he was talking about something called Watergate. And as a 5-year-old, I didn't understand what on earth was going on. But I did understand that he had a far nicer job than my dad did. And his job was likely to be far more attractive than what my father was up to at that particular moment. And I didn't appreciate, of course, the wonders of my dad's career at that point, but I became obsessed with being on the radio, and everything I did from that moment on was directed particularly at getting a radio show and working for 2 hours a day, or at least that's what I thought, and ended up hosting a daily live business radio show, which is streamed all over the world, but located in Johannesburg and Cape Town until in June of 2024. I made a decision to step down and to carve my own path after 20 years of speaking to some of the most remarkable business leaders, most remarkable people in NGOs. And I figured out that the one thing they all had in common was decision-making at the very, very highest levels, whether it be policymakers from Alan Greenspan to Mervyn King at the Bank of England and others, and understanding that these people have to apply a huge amount of rigor to what it is that they do. And I really wanted to get under the skin of what they did so that I could better understand that process and make better decisions. But highlights, yeah, every day was a highlight. I mean, I don't mean to cop out on this, but the privilege of sitting behind a microphone and interviewing remarkable people and learning from remarkable people, taking those lessons and putting them into books and putting them into public speaking, and really sharing what I've learned from these people in a tangible, easy to understand kind of way is an extraordinary privilege, which makes every day a highlight, I suppose. But yeah, it's been fun so far, and it's becoming more fun, I think.
I think that's a fantastic answer. Now, were you referring to the Watergate scandal? Because that's what got me interested in journalism initially when I
Did
was,
it?
when I was I think it was before university. I think I was at school. I was about 14,
Mm.
15. I heard about the Watergate scandal. I thought, oh, journalism, investigative journalism. Now, I haven't really gone into investigative journalism, but I am a journalist. And it's interesting that you
Mm.
also related to that story and that's what got you interested. I think that was a lovely answer. And I completely agree. This is such a privilege, isn't it?
It is, most certainly is.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky to be able to do what we do. And what we have to keep doing and remind ourselves that we have to keep doing is that we've got a huge responsibility to audiences to help. We're kind of a filter or a funnel, if you like, of a vast array of information. And in an age where information is being abused, where information is where truth is sort of playing second fiddle to facts, where truth is playing second fiddle to agendas. We need to become more and more aware in what is becoming an increasingly ambiguous world, what information we consume, how we filter that information. And in studying entrepreneurs and chief executives and policymakers for more than 20 years now, I've come down to one essential fact, and that is that those who are truly most successful in the world are those who are able to traverse ambiguity better than others, and who are able to cut out the noise, are able to define what is really important to them. And I've figured out a way of helping people do that in terms of sifting out the noise and the nonsense and really honing it down to its bare essentials and focusing only on what you need to know rather than being overwhelmed by the flood of information. We allow so much information into our lives each and every single day. Most of it is superfluous. Most of it is irrelevant. Most of it is titillation and interesting and fun. Very little of it serves the purpose of our making better decisions so that we get better business, life, social outcomes everywhere we go.
I think that's really interesting. And where does the statement that we make 35,000 decisions a day come from? What's the research behind it?
And so you will see a very carefully worded every time I talk about we make 35,000 decisions every day. I don't ever say that. I say the internet tells us we make 35,000 decisions every
But
day.
the internet
And
tells us a lot. How do you know
it
that's a truthful
does.
statement?
No, and it does. If you did dig a little deeper into it, each and every single word we utter is, in fact, a decision, whether it is a conscious or a subconscious decision or not. This decision to sit down and have this conversation is the culmination of many processes and many decisions. So if you consider that the average person, and you and I speak, I think, a lot more than the average person, but the average person speaks between 15 and 17,000 words a day, that is already a huge chunk of the decisions that we make each and every single day. And it is, and most of these decisions are inconsequential. Most of them don't have any real impact on the world, but they are the big ones. They are the big ones as to whether or not we change jobs, whether or not we chase the money or we chase the career fulfillment, whether or not we choose to marry or stay single, whether or not if we have children, where to send them to school and how to educate them and how to interact with them on it each and every single day. So whether there are, in fact, 35,000 decisions each and every single day, good luck trying to prove that or disprove it. But certainly it's a culmination of every single decision that we make is, they're all add up ultimately.
Okay. And how conscious is the decision-making process? Does a lot of the process actually happen subconsciously? And how can we measure this distinction?
It's so important, isn't it? Because most of our decisions are subconscious. Very seldom do we consider, I wonder what my next word is going to be. They kind of just
Mm.
flow because our brains are wired. We've got 86 billion neurons in our brains, and they're each connected to thousands of others. And it's what makes us who we are, and how we remember things, and how we choose to remember things, and what we include and exclude from our memory banks, and what our value systems are, all of these various things. And so many of the decisions are just simply, we regard them as a reaction, but they're also the result of the values we hold, our upbringing, all of these various things. But there are certainly things that we can do better. And one of the key factors that I've recorded over some 50,000 interviews, that was a calculation and a half, trying to figure that out over more than
Wow.
20 years.
It's a little
Let's
more
say,
than me.
what would the relevant, that's what happens when you're on the radio for 2 hours every single day, 5 days a week, 220 days a year over 20 years. It adds up.
Give me a few
And
years and I'll catch up with you.
oh, but I'm already doing it every day anyway. So no, and this isn't a contest, but it was
Oh,
just
it is.
that, and I'm winning. Every day is a process of eliminating what we think won't serve us versus what will serve us. And each and every single day is stacking up the big calls. Do we make a phone call? Do we make a connection? Do we have the guts to make an impossible call? I was chatting to Sir Brad Fried, who was chairman of the Bank of England over the Brexit process. And I one of the finest things that I learned from Brad Fried in that moment is, what do you have to lose? I mean, each one of us every day sort of, there's a big call that we want to make, and well, procrastinators anonymous will never ever get to a point of true success, because if we keep putting off the big calls and we keep postponing those moments that could change our lives. And Brad Fried, as a young man, he'd qualified as a chartered accountant and had decided that he needed to break out of the drudgery of the audit, and made a call based on a whim from a copy of Fortune magazine, which he came across in the law firm library, and it said, Jim Wolfenson, the King of Wall Street. And Jim Wolfenson had just turned around the Chrysler Motor Corporation. He's no wallflower and something of a strategic genius. And Jim Wilkinson was sitting in his office in New York. The phone rang and he said, "Hello, Mr. Wolfenson. My name is Brad Freed. I was wondering if we could have a moment of your time." And Wolfenson was so amused by the audacity of this young man that he encouraged him. And they ended up having several conversations. Wolfenson went on to be appointed by Bill Clinton as head of the World Bank twice. And Brad Freed followed his advice, went to Wharton, got his MBA cum laude, and joined McKinsey, then joined Investec as its chief executive. Global financial crisis comes along, and he goes onto the board of the Bank of England or the court of the Bank of England, and then becomes its chairman. And all of that sort of stems from one decision, which was, I'm going to phone somebody who may very well shout and scream and have a diva moment and slam the phone down in my ear or tell me that I should never phone them again. But what do I have to lose? What's the worst that can happen? And so often in life, I mean, it's such a valuable lesson and something that I increasingly try to apply as well. When you're about to make a pitch or you're about to enter into a negotiation or to a discussion, or you're about to put up your hand in a meeting and you're about to vocalize an idea which might be contrary to what the broad swathe of opinion in the room is, but you feel strongly about this, and it's going to be hard for you to stick around after this meeting because you fundamentally disagree. At that point, what do you have to lose? Because if the prevailing sense goes against what you truly believe in, your values or whatever the case might be, well, you're not going to want to stick around in that organization. At best, you should be introducing a contrarian view, a view that says, have we considered this properly? Have we made the right decision? My view on this is I think we should do X rather than Y, and you may very well sway the room. But if you don't do it, you will always be left wondering, what if? It was a good job. I liked the people I worked with, but I couldn't stay there anymore. But what did I actually do about it? Did I make a decision to stand up and be counted, or did I simply go with the flow? And so often, I think so many people follow the path of least resistance.
Is it a self-doubt thing that stops us from making those decisions to go and make that call, put your hand up in a meeting, be a bit controversial perhaps? Is it a fear of rejection? Is it a deep-seated sort of lack of self-confidence that stops us doing these things?
I think it's exactly what it is. But it's also, if you are an expert in your field, if you're pretty good at what you do, and you are able to argue on the facts rather than the emotions, and this is where facts become so absolutely important in a world where there is so much conflicting data and information, and where narratives are taking the place of facts, and people are constructing narratives and are constructing versions of truth that suit them, and many of these things are being fueled by social media and social media agendas and the sort of information we consume. I've found in my experience, the moment you bring facts into an argument, it becomes very difficult for anybody to counter that. When somebody comes back to you and said, I feel, and you go, well, okay, I respect how you feel, but how you feel, I'm not sure what your feelings are informed by, but this is the data. These are the facts. And if we do this, if we go this particular path, these are the likely outcomes. I strongly recommend, based on what I have read, what I have learned, what I have experienced, I believe this course of action is stronger. It's at those times where you are making career limiting or career enhancing decisions. And that is why when you go into any sort of discussion, it's best to go in forewarned, forearmed, and fully prepared, but understanding that the moment you put up your hand and you stand out, very few people like that sort of thing, particularly if you go against prevailing wisdom. And that's why I really have loved every moment and continue to love every moment of picking the brains of the sorts of people I've had the privilege of interacting with over many, many years who have made those calls. You never hear about the ones who made the calls and lost the arguments because they got turfed out. But we follow success, don't we?
We do. So tell us about your podcast, The Art of Deciding, and who your target audience is.
I have in mind a busy commuter. I have in mind a busy commuter who's got half an hour of time, so we don't go over 30 minutes. I can't bear the long and
Oh no.
rambling Joe Rogan podcasts of the world, and you really struggle to find where the point was. And I see myself sort of going for the busy commuter, but not necessarily just the C-suite commuter, although the podcast is designed to appeal to them. But one of the loveliest things I was told time and time again in doing 20 years of business radio, which is very earnest and very serious. It's all about, oof, it's frightfully important. And what I came to realize in the journey of hosting this radio show was that, yeah, the data and the numbers are important, but actually, um, I am more enthralled by people. I'm more enthralled by people's processes and the decisions that they make, and drawing from them lessons that I am then able to extrapolate and share. And by being able to do that and to synthesize it, I would have people coming up to me in the shops and going, "Oh, I heard the interview with this person. Weren't they fascinating? Or I never thought that they were that, funny. Or I never thought that they were actually human because they work for a large and grubby corporation that's one of the filthiest polluters in the world. But the way you interviewed them, you actually made me understand that they know that it's unacceptable to be managing this business, and you then pushed them on their climate change data, and they had to admit where they'd failed and succeeded. But actually, it made them a bit more human. And so the excitement of finding the humanity that we all share, regardless of whether you are the highfalutin chief executive or the founder of whatever corporation that you are, ultimately you have a family. Ultimately, you have friends. Ultimately, you have people who you have to look in the eye first thing in the morning as to whether or not you're behaving as a decent human in a world where the hunger for profits and the hunger for success is often clouds the humanity of people. And so, yeah, who do I want to appeal to? I want to appeal to the C-suite executive, but I also want to appeal to whoever's doing washing up the dishes that night, and they've
Mm.
chosen to listen to a podcast that they find interesting, and they find it warm and engaging, and they may learn a thing or two from it, from somebody who has inhabited an office that they would never dream of going into themselves. But because of the humanity of this individual and the way in which they got to where they got to, actually they're just humans like the rest of us. They still have biology which affects them, and they are remarkable. But we can learn from this remarkable people, and I love extracting those lessons.
I read a story the other day where a CEO, big CEO, big untouchable, unreachable,
Ooh,
uncommunicative
my
CEO,
favorite kinds, yes.
scary CEO,
Oh,
wanted to appear more authentic and human. And I don't think he contrived this, but he posted a photo on a social media channel of his shoes. Now, they were both brown, but they were not a matching pair of shoes. This
lovely.
photo went viral, and instantly he was being contacted for interviews and tell us about the shoes, tell us about the shoes. And isn't that funny? I thought that was quite relevant because we do
Yeah,
think these
and,
people are
and
untouchable, and
yeah,
bringing the humanity out of these untouchable sort of stoic sort of leaders can be very
I get
beneficial and make us realize we are all
um,
human.
I get a little cynical about those sorts of things because sometimes you've got somebody who's actually deep down bad and nasty. I'm not suggesting that Mr. Mismatched Brown Shoes is anything but lovely and personable and charming.
Yeah.
But I get a little bit cynical by the PR hype. And so
Mm.
I'm a public relations person's worst nightmare, simply because I call out bulldust when I see it. And I go, oh, God, really? We're not talking about the shoes. But if you're going to come on because we're using the shoes as a hook, I'm going to find something else more interesting and relevant to talk about as well. We'll start with the shoes, but it's not about the shoes.
Mm.
And yeah, we've got to be careful about being sucked into the hype cycle of feel good la la. Um, as funny, as charming, and as engaging and as enticing as it is, because ultimately these are people who are responsible for public money more often than not. These are people who are responsible for investing your pension fund. These are people who are responsible for teams of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people. And they're making, fairly ruthless decisions each and every single day in the interests of the business or the shareholder or the stakeholder, or whoever they choose to talk to. So we've got to be cautious, I think, of being sucked into the social media hype and vortex, which is one of the problems and one of the reasons why I'm honing in on decision making. Because yes, we can have a little bit of fun with the mismatched shoes, but let's use this opportunity also to ask you this question, and let's advance our understanding of what makes this very human tick, and the sort of decisions that they're making within their enterprise. Because yes, you've got the mismatched shoes, but also you've laid off 5,000 people. It must have been a tough decision. How did you get to that? Let's
Mm.
not give them a free pass at every opportunity.
And what you're talking about there really is the power of being on the journalism side of the desk, because I've done both. I've been in PR, I've been in journalism. I
Have you been in
hate
PR?
PR. I hate
No, PR is
PR.
wonderful and
It's a
has a
great,
role in the world, but it's got to be contested. And we've always got to be going, what is the motivation behind their
absolutely.
selling the story so hard? And
Mm.
yeah, and
And
the
I was,
power of no, the power of no is a wonderful thing sitting behind a microphone. Somebody approaches you, oh, I've got this wonderful story. Why? And if they can't answer why, and if it's not relevant, and then we don't do it. Somebody else may do it and they may get, 50 million likes. I don't care because that's not what we do.
it's not meaningful, is it? The amount of likes you get,
No.
and I don't care about that kind of thing anyway. What do you think of the relationship between PR and journalism? Is it mutually beneficial? Who has the upper hand between PR and journalism in your experience?
It depends on how much hard work you're prepared to do as a journalist. Certainly, as a facilitator of access, there are very few things more powerful than public relations. Public relations practitioners need to respect the channels that they use, the personalities that they offer interviews to. So often, I would lose out on interviews because I'd given the previous chief executive a tough time, and I'm very comfortable with that because I'm not there to serve the public relations practitioner. I'm not there to serve myself. I'm there to serve an audience. I'm there to help an audience better understand issues. And if you are an executive or you're a founder of a company and you need to answer some questions, you should want to go to the place where you're going to get the roughest ride. You should want to go to a place where you are going to be tested, and
Mm.
but treated fairly, very important, on the facts. And you should be put through your paces in a way that if your position is defensible, you're able to defend it and you will be heard, but you will be challenged as well. And people, thinking people can tell the difference between fluff and substance. And I would go for substance every time. I recall one public relations practitioner that I respected very, very deeply, a wonderful professional, called me up the one day and said, I've tried to stop my boss, but he insists on coming onto your radio show. And I said, why? He said, because he knows that you will put him through the ringer. And they were going through some very
Grill
big
him.
competition issues around the world. And he said, I just want you to know that it's no hold barred. And I said, I just want you to know that I wouldn't do anything else. And it was a firm conversation, but it was a conversation from which I think that chief executive emerged better than when they went in because they were able to
Mm.
stand their ground. They were able to justify the decisions that they'd made. And so by putting people under pressure in that sort of space where there is no second take, there is no opportunity to go, oh, can we just do that again? I'm sorry, I was a bit distracted. Too late. It's live. Off you go. And yeah, it's a wonderful position to be in. So yes, there is a huge role for public relations. At the same time, public relations, where I've had disagreements with the public relations industry, is where could you, yeah, we give you this, but you're not allowed to talk about the fact that they were on Clapham Common and had seemed to be struggling to find their belt. Sorry, that is the story, whatever the case might be. So you have to be absolutely clear on your values and your positioning and your proposition as you go into these discussions.
And we're running out of time, I'm afraid. But as a
What? We've only
decision-making
just started.
expert, I know we've only just begun. What are your tips for making good, well-considered decisions and avoiding regrets?
Oh, have you ever seen those stories of the nurses who, there were a couple about 5 or 6 years ago, where nurses, one particular nurse, I wish I could remember her name, but she wrote a book on the regrets of the dying. And it was so poignant because so often these were very high powered people in life. There were people for whom the world quaked and quivered. And as they lay on their deathbeds, and she must have had a wonderful bedside manner, they were able to relate to her their biggest regrets. And most often, the biggest regret was, I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I wish I hadn't chased the jobs. I wish I hadn't chased the money, because ultimately what matters is how we turn up in the world and what we do. So, yeah, the role of decision making is one that it comes down to personal values. It comes down to the best outcome that you can achieve, how to achieve that best outcome. When you go into a meeting with a team of people and you're wanting them to have a particular goal, do you go in and bark orders at them, or do you sit back and ask questions? Do you get the best out of your team? How closely do you direct your team, or do you trust the fact that you've done a really good hiring process and you've employed some really smart people who are able to get a far better decision together than you could come up with on your own? And are you able to park your ego at the door enough for them to leave the meeting, be completely bewildered by what you think? And your ability then to say to them, it doesn't matter what I think. This is a great decision. Let's implement this decision. And so often people in so-called leadership positions feel their job is to bark orders and to give instructions and to lead from the front and charge. And in my experience, the best leaders are those who take the flak when things go wrong and give praise when things go right, and never put themselves front and center of the process. And those are true leaders. And I think great decision making shapes and forms great leaders, and great leaders are people who are able to amplify others. And that's probably one of the greatest decisions anybody in a leadership position can take.
I think that's a fantastic answer, Bruce Whitfield. It's been a real pleasure to interview you today and a fascinating discussion. So thank you for joining me on the business of decision making. Where can we follow
Thank you,
your work
Wizzi.
online and tune into your podcast, The Art of Deciding?
The Art of Deciding with Bruce Whitfield. And isn't it funny that as I was sort of reframing and reshaping and rethinking, I said, what is it that I do? And it was a case of I want, what I've been doing for the last 20 years, and now I'm focusing in on it. And that is going into leadership teams and helping them zone out of what's not important, zone in on what is important, being able to know what to ignore and really focus on what matters to them, their enterprises, their teams, and just help them filter out the rubbish and the nonsense and the daily dirge of so-called news flow, and really to focus on the facts and make better decisions.
Fantastic. So I take it we can listen to that podcast on all the usual channels.
On all the good channels.
All
I
the
don't
good
know.
channels.
I've never been to a bad podcast channel, so I wouldn't know. But yes, it is on. It's on Apple
Okay,
and
the main ones,
Spotify and
Apple
all
and
of the other good
Spotify and
places.
all of those. Okay, fantastic. Bruce Whitfield, once again, an honor. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.
Thank you, Wizzi.
How was that for you?
It was lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, thank
We're
you
still
for
recording, so I
visiting.
shouldn't be saying